Resolute and the Resolute Podcast, where we are discipling and developing men to live with conviction. I am Vince Miller, your host, and today we are discussing building leadership values. Men, welcome back to the program. If this is your first time tuning in, then thank you for joining us. The Resolute Podcast is produced multiple times every week. We have Resolute study guides that go along with this podcast for your men's group, found on the website for members at beresolute.org. Feel free to come back often, add the podcast to your favorite RSS feed or in iTunes. You can also follow us on Twitter and Facebook. All the links are on the homepage of our website. So let's dive in. Today we're going to continue to build our leadership framework with the next lesson entitled Values. A value is defined as something of importance that has worth. You know, to some extent, everything we have has some sense of value. The clothes we wear, the homes we live in, the talents we have, and even the relationships we have with each other, like you with me and I with you. So we can apply value to things that are both tangible and intangible. You know, I remember years ago when I was much younger, I had the opportunity to visit the Natural History Museum in Washington, D.C. The one thing, of course, that I wanted to see during my visit was the Hope Diamond, the largest blue diamond in the world, weighing in at a little over 45 carats. Now, I got to tell you, that's pretty big, right? So I walked in, I started traversing the caves of this museum, and after about 45 minutes, finally found it in a small room tucked in the back with an armed guard. There in the corner sat the Hope Diamond behind thick security glass. Now, the one thing I could not wait to know was how much this diamond was worth. Its value, right? At the bottom of the description was written the value of this diamond. Do you know what it said? Just one word: priceless. Slightly frustrated and irritated by the ambiguity of that description, I turned to the guard who was standing there and said in my youthful voice, "Come on, man. It's got to be worth something." To which the guard said to me, "Son, we don't know how much it's worth. While we could guess, possessions only have value when they are bought and sold. Since this diamond will never be sold again, we have no idea what it might be worth." I think this guard nailed it, right? I mean, he made two great points. First, that the value of the diamond is determined when in the transaction, not the possession. And number two, or second, as we transact, both parties assign a value and together determine the real value of the product or maybe the service. Therefore, in the transaction, we are defining the difference between the assigned value and the real value. Let me illustrate this a little differently. I usually hold up a $20 bill to describe this, and as I do, I use it to denote two types of value. First, real value, and second, assigned value. Do you know what the real value of a $20 bill is? Well, I bet you do. At least, I think you get the idea. The real value of a $20 bill is about 5.7 cents. That's the real value. This is the real cost of the paper, the ink, and the labor. However, there is also an assigned value that we give to this 5.7 cent piece of paper. That is, of course, $20. The difference between these two types of value is important for our discussion today. So as it relates to this lesson, there is also one more definition of value that's important to define. It is what we call a personal value. A personal value is a principle or standard of behavior through which one judges what is important. Today, we're going to be discussing how our personal values inform our leadership. Now, please listen carefully to the statement that I'm about to make, because I'm going to put everything together that I just said into one single statement. In our leadership, each of us have personal values to which we assign value, which we transact with others who give them real value. Most of the time, our personal values go unspoken until, of course, someone devalues them. As we lead, these values become real because we're constantly transacting them with others using our time, talent, and treasure. So our goal today is to really understand these personal values and how we use them for a personal measurement system in our leadership. Couple texts for you today, though I want you to see. The first one is from Proverbs 20, verse 10. It reads, "Unequal weights and unequal measures are both alike an abomination to the Lord." The second text I'm going to read today is from Isaiah 29, verses 13 through 15. It reads, "And the Lord said, because this people draw near to me with their mouth and honor me with their lips, while their hearts are far from me, and their fear of me is a commandment taught by men. Therefore, behold, I will do again wonderful things with this people, with wonder upon wonder, and the wisdom of their wise men shall perish, and the discernment of the discerning men shall be hidden. Ah, you who hide deep from the Lord your counsel, whose deeds are done in the dark, and who say, who sees us, and who knows us?" Now, I got to tell you, these are two really strong texts, right? First, let's look at the proverb. You probably already noticed this as I read it, very short, right? But this proverb seems to reference inconsistency within the human heart, which is represented by deceptive judgments. In this case, judgments which lack integrity and thus expose our heart and motive. I think the word integrity is really the key concept of this proverb. In Old Testament times, everything that was exchanged was valued through weights and measures. This proverb clarifies that deception with false weights and measures tell the truth about a deceptive heart. And it is the heart that is the issue, especially when it tries to deceive, and that is the abomination to the Lord. Now, the second text in Isaiah references the integrity or lack of integrity between what people say and what they do. What we say and do can either be integrated, that is connected together, or non-integrated, that is not connected together. In the end, what we learn is that nothing can be hid from God because He knows the motives of everyone's heart. And what God values is people whose heart, word, and action are deeply integrated because He is a God, catch this, who values deep integrity. Deep integrity. Don't you like that about our God? I mean, I think this is what's great about our God, is that He has His own set of values, and He wants us to have our own. He wants us to assume some of His, and He wants them to be connected to the things that we say and do. Therefore, we live with integrity as one of our values. So, how do these values all work? So today I want you to consider a short case study. So here's the situation. We have Mike, who's a father, a defense attorney, a Christian, and a father of 3 boys. His youngest son, Steve, is now a high school student and is discovering his own personal value system. He shares that with his dad that in his religion class in school, they've been discussing moral values, and thus is coming to his father to try to make sense out of why his father defends people who are immoral and have committed heinous crimes. Now, this is a great point of maturity for Steve because as a young man, he's developing his own understanding of a personal value and is concerned about what appears to be this inconsistency in his father's proclaimed morals as a Christian and the apparent inconsistency of his occupation as a defense attorney. This is a great example of how values play out in real life. What you see in this case study is you see many things playing out. First, you see ethics playing out. Ethics is the study of what is right and wrong, which is what Steve was actually studying in school. Second, morals. Morals are the way that a person acts or the way they think they should act, even if they don't. This can either be prescriptive or descriptive. The best case scenario, though, is both. Third, values. What we've already defined, and in a few different ways, but here we see them in action. Values, when used, are the measurement system of the consistency between assigned and real value. but they also measure the consistency between many things. For example, between our morals and ethics. They measure the consistency between what we prescribe and describe morally. And they measure the consistency between our personal values and organizational values. So they measure a lot of things, whether they're congruent or incongruent, consistent or inconsistent, integrated or non-integrated. That's what values do. They are a personal measurement system. And what Steve is really noticing is he's picking up on what appears to be an apparent, and I want to emphasize the word apparent, an apparent inconsistency between his father's personal and organizational values. His concern is that his dad was not acting according to his Christian values by representing criminals. Of course, the quick answer to this dilemma is that if Mike represents them fairly and with character, of course, he's not compromising his Christian values. But it was an apparent inconsistency to Steve that needed a little bit more explanation. I think this is one of the great dilemmas for all leaders. It is the dilemma of what we should do when our personal values collide with something like our career or an ethical situation or the morality of others. Often when our values collide in this way, well, sometimes we find new friends or another place to work, right? A place where we can find convergence of values, where our personal values and organizational values match. Because when we find convergence, we are free to make the greatest impact and therefore lead with the greatest freedom. You know why? Because I think in our hearts we intuitively know that when we find value convergence, we lead with greater passion, freedom, and daily excitement. And those following us, or those we follow, work together to make a better impact. Most organizations I know share their values publicly because these focus employee behaviors and drive how they work together as a team to do business. And they hire and recruit employees who do business with customers who share these values, right? So for one example, I attend my church because it values, number one, sharing the gospel, and number two, teaching from the Bible. These are valuable to me in the church that I attend, and therefore I made my decision based on these values. Another example is I use Apple products. Why? Because I value the simplicity and the syncing ability between my devices. Okay, don't hate me for this, and you don't have to love me for it either, but this is something that I value. And changing all these devices at this point would become complicated. So maybe I value the ease of change too, right? So to close our time today, I think it's very valuable for us to understand our values, our personal ones, how they play out, discerning what they might be, identifying and defining them, and then trying to understand how they connect with the world around us. Do we share the same values at the place where we work, at the place where we attend church, at the people that we follow, and the people that we lead? So guys, I think this is very important in the leadership of our life because these unseen values, well, they drive the behaviors of our life, right? And these apparent inconsistencies are very important because God values integrity and consistency. Well, that's the show. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed our time today, we hope that you will pass along this podcast to other men you know. Just head to our website, beresolute.org, or the Resolute app, or simply share the feed. Men, I want to encourage you to find a couple of other men to join in with you because listening on your own is absolutely wonderful, but finding other men to do this with you is way better. So guys, get off the bench, get into the game, lead with value, and please join us next time for another edition of the Resolute Podcast.